Oh, yeah, it's live time. Good afternoon, my peeps. I tell you what, today's story, we're just going to deep dive into it, man. I got my boy here, Carl. What's up, buddy?
How are you, sir?
Oh, I am excited and great. Besides the 5-degree weather here, man, here in West Virginia, man, I see that you're somewhere nice and warm right now.
I am, and it's really kind of funny. I'm in Florida right now, and it's going to get down to 30 this 34, I think, Saturday night, and I mean, it's below zero everywhere else in the country, and everybody's just tripping. I mean, it's really funny to watch. People getting out. It's 60, 55 here, and they get out their mink coats, and it's really funny.
Too funny. Well, tell them they can come up here. We got ski coats on for the next 6 months. Well, hey,
Yeah.
Carl, thank you so much, man. And today, our inspiring story is, man, everybody knows Carl as the man with the three-piece suit, sharp dressed man at every conference. But today, there's another story we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the beginnings of what developed into benefits in a card and everything else. So, Carl, let's just go back, brother. Let's go back to your childhood, man. Let's just deep dive in, where you grew up at and how was it, man?
Well, I when I look back on my childhood, and some people when they hear the story, they might go, "Well, what's wrong with him?" But quite frankly, I had a wonderful childhood and had a wonderful time growing up, and a lot of that was, we just went outside and played. My mother married a man when I was one who had five children, and I was born in Detroit, and so she married a man when I was one who had five kids, and so I grew up in a family in inner city Detroit, Michigan. We had three bedrooms, one bath, and eight people, and so it was a tight quarters. I had five stepbrothers and sisters, which I didn't know any different. I thought they were my own. You don't think about that as a small child, and of course, I went by their last name and my stepfather's last name at the time, and went to school, and it was just kind of you don't know any different. You
Hmm.
don't know any different until you start to figure it out. And I guess I was 12 when my mom and stepfather separated, and he lost his job and became angry. I would say would be the best word I could use for that, and then became mentally, emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive. Um, and it kind of started with the oldest and then trickled on down to me. And I think by the time I was 12 was when my mother finally said, I got to get him out of this environment. And so he still had three children at home. My two oldest brothers, one went in the Navy, one went in the Air Force. And so then he moved back in with us into our apartment. And my mom and I had this little two-bedroom apartment. And he moved back in with us, pretty much deserted his children. My oldest sister raised those two. And then about 15, I decided, I can't, I'm not. And of course, at 15 years old, you'd have nothing left to learn, right? I knew everything. And so,
Were you
so
okay? So I got to ask you, Carl, real quick.
yeah,
Were you like on the streets a little bit, or I mean, what's going through your mind? Going to school and all that stuff with all this going on.
well, so I did really well in school. I did really well in school up until about the ninth grade. I moved out when I was 15. So
Hmm.
I just said, I can't do this anymore. I told my mom, I love you. I'm out of here. I can't do him no more. I'm out. And so they actually moved to Florida, probably 6 months after I left. And, so 15 years old, kind of sitting on the curb, wondering where you're going to live, what you're going to do. I'd always worked. I started working when I was 8, paper route. Then I was a caddy. Uh, then restaurants, busboy, all that. And back, in the 80s, you didn't really, they take you, if you were 14 years old and you looked like you were 16, you go to work, nobody asked you for anything. And so it was easy to work and easy to find work. So I wasn't shy about work, and I actually loved it. And So high school, I pretty much, because I had to work, about flunked out of high school. I graduated on a D average.
No
Started my
way.
first company. I started my first company, Home Tune Up, at 16, because I realized that I couldn't pay my bills working in restaurants, bussing tables. I actually had a job at Taco Bell. I used to remember, I still remember those little things that would hang down behind the cash register and you'd write the order down. And I'd walk up to it. And I was kind of tall, so I'd bang my head on that thing every time I go to take an order. And, but
I
then
love, by the way, Carl, I love Taco Bell. I work there too. Welcome to the border. Can I take your order?
yeah, welcome to the border. Can I take your order? And I was on the wrestling team at the time. So it was free food. I mean, I was bulked up, man. I was eating those bean burritos and beef burritos. Yeah, I mean, those were the days. But when we started Home Tune Up, it was out of a need, right, to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all knew how to paint, right? We all had to paint our houses. We all had to paint for our parents, our grandparents. And so we started this Home Tune Up and painting houses, and then grew that. And we bought a cement truck, and we started pouring patios and concrete. And I had a mason who was a great mentor to me, Mr. Harris. And, there really aren't many masons out there. So to really be able to learn from a guy that had been doing it for 50 years was an incredible opportunity. And we ended up selling that company to our foreman, Billy Latner. And I believe he's still running it today, and it's very successful. And then went on to move down to Florida. My mom, as I mentioned, my stepfather was very abusive, and he'd actually beat my mother pretty bad. And I drove down to Florida to get her out of that situation. And then I got to Florida, and we sold Home Tune Up. And so then I'm like, okay, what do I do now, right? What am I going to do? And so we had come down to, when I say we, my buddies and myself, we'd all come down to Fort Lauderdale as high school students, right? That was our spring break, was Fort Lauderdale. First year was Daytona. Then it was the last 3 years were Fort Lauderdale. And so it seemed like every year we went, we had less and less money. And so I had figured out how to camp out at a KOA and live for like $200 or $300. Where to go? You buy a cocktail, you get a free buffet for dinner, all of these discounts. So I put together a magazine. We called it the Spring Breaker.
Get out.
Published a magazine on how to live in Fort Lauderdale, basically for next to nothing on spring break. And our intention was, or our goal was, to get all the advertising sold and then print it and then ship it to the colleges that had the biggest attendance. Well, none of that came together in time to happen. So here I am sitting on a warehouse full of printed goods.
No way.
And now I had to figure out how to distribute them. So that was an interesting challenge. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I've grown to learn that when things go wrong in business, it's a very good thing, because it makes you think of something better. And so, how they have the Panama Jack suntan huts at all the pools, all the hotels everywhere. And so I went and cut a deal with all the Panama Jack stands. And there was one dude who had a bunch of them, right? So got a hold of him, figured that whole thing out. And then I got them selling my magazines, $5 a crack for $300 worth of savings. And they'd get $2 out of every magazine they sold. They went like hotcakes. So that was really cool. And the next year, Fort Lauderdale by the Sea, a little town next to Fort Lauderdale, really wanted to turn it into a convention town. And so I thought, wow, it's time to get out. This isn't going to be user friendly for my business. And so I sold the rights to Budweiser and Ocean Pacific, and then met a gentleman. And I was now about 21, 22, now 21.
Time out real quick. Was there coupons for the elbow room in there?
Yeah, there was. The elbow room was in my magazine. The candy store, which was Robbie Hink's operation, all of those places that we remember as kids.
Wow.
And I actually went to take a photograph in a place that at the time I think it was called the Trophy Room, and I'll never forget. I walked in there. I rose. This is when you took camera pictures, right? You real
Mm-hmm.
camera thing. So I got the camera up, and through the lens, I saw two of the biggest gentlemen that I've ever seen in my life. They must have been like 300 pounds and 6'5" each. I mean, massive guys. And long story short, they threw me out the front door, and those were two big wooden doors. I rolled down the stairs, and that camera hit me in the head. And I thought, well, I'll never take a picture in that place again. And so, yeah, a lot of funny stories behind that, publishing that magazine. We really had a good time with that. But anyhow, so I met a guy who was a trader on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. He was an S&P trader, Jimmy Pierce, who grew to be one of my dearest friends. He's now passed away about 6 years ago. But Jimmy was a legend in Chicago and the S&P pit. And so he took me on, showed me the ropes. I was an independent trader. So when you're a trader, the difference between a trader and a broker is when you're a trader, you're trading your own money. So you're not trading other people's money. You're not investing for them. And you're trading typically on a daily basis. So your positions are, most of the time, we were closed out at the end of the day. So it's in and out, right? It's a different game than like your investment banker or wealth manager. It's a pretty high stress game. But I always loved stocks. I love the stock market. I had a fabulous mentor in Jimmy, one of the world's greatest at the time, and I made a lot of money. A lot for a 22-year-old kid. And I was really doing a good job at it. And Jimmy and another guy, Rick Barnes, who was another legend, he was a commodities trader. They got into a soybean trade. And so Jimmy's down on his yacht, and Rick Barnes is over in London, and and they're calling me, and I'm putting on their soybean trade. So I had to leave the Mercantile Exchange, go over to the Chicago Board of Trade so I could put their trades on. Well, of course, as any good student would do, well, if these guys are really smart, they're really rich, and they're putting all their money in this, I ought to be buying some soybeans. So I started buying soybeans, like 100,000 bushels, a pretty good chunk of soybeans for my side. Now, these guys were buying a lot more. And then so the soybeans started going up, and boy, I mean, I thought I was a hero. I mean, I'd figured something out. Well, I didn't figure anything out. And about 4 days into that success, Brazil came out and announced that they had just found 17 gazillion bushels of beans.
No way.
Yeah. And so in the commodities market, they have what they call lock limit down. So the beans opened up the next day, they were lock limit down 30 cents. The following day, lock limit down 30 cents. That means you can't get in, you can't get out. It's just lock limit, the market's closed.
Damn.
And so the third day, they extended the limits to 45 cents. Boom, lock limit down again. Fourth day, boom, lock limit down. Yeah. On the fifth day, I finally got out of the trade. I mean, I told you, I made a good bit of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I went past zero like a rocket. When I got out of that trade, I was down $500,000 in my account.
You got to be kidding me. Okay, so what's going through your mind, Carl, at this point? I mean, because it sounds like you were like all high, like I'm making all this money, and then.
Oh yeah, and so I thought I was going to end up in the Detroit or the Chicago River. I really did. And, the one they colored green on St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy O'Connor, who owns O'Connor Grain, Billy passed away years ago, but great man. And he was another mentor of mine. And he called me in his office, and he had this big cigar and about this long. I mean, it always seemed like that thing had to be a foot long. Mm. And he always had that big cigar hanging out of his mouth. And I thought, oh boy. I mean, he's like, he's a big old Irish guy, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I'm going to the river. And he said, Carl, he said, I think a lot of you. And I said, yes, sir. And I do you. And he said, now I'm going to tell you what we're going to do today. Yes, sir.
Uh-oh.
He said, I'm going to lend you $100,000. I said, okay. He said, I want you to pay me all my money back. And he said, if I see a trade come through my firm from you on from any other floor other than the S&P 500 trading pit, it's curtains.
Uh-oh.
I didn't know what Billy meant when he said curtains, but it sure
The Godfather.
set in with me.
Ooh, yeah.
So I paid him all his money back in probably about 6 months. It was a very stellar run for me. I had a few bucks in my pocket, and I just said, I'm out. I don't really understand the game anymore. It's all become computerized, and I moved back to Greenville, South Carolina. When I got back to Carolina, I didn't have a whole lot of money, so I got an apartment, kind of got my act together, bought a vehicle because I didn't have a car in Chicago, didn't need one. And so then it was like, okay, well, I'd really like to start another business, but I'm broke, again. So this was like that was the second or third time I'd been technically.
I gotta ask you, Carl, real quick. What's the feeling like? Because when you're up there where you're like making all this money, you're living the lifestyle of the rich and famous, and then you go straight to like almost the bottom, like in an apartment. What's going through your mind?
It was just a game to me.
Oh,
like
okay.
it honestly, when I was making, and I'll just share it with you, I was up 2.6 million at 22 years old. And but I had no understanding of the value of money. I had no understanding. I mean, for me, being this, kid from Detroit who grew up without a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, I was happy to go out on Friday night, buy a steak, drink a bottle of wine with my friends. And that was big, and I could afford my studio. So I didn't have a car, so as long as I had money to do what this could go up and down. That was just like a measuring stick to me, So long story short, when I got back to South Carolina, I thought, I'm broken, so I need to get a job. And I took a job working for 3M at the time. They sold to Lanier, but I went to work for their copier division. And so I was selling copiers and fax machines out of the back of my Jeep Cherokee in 89, 90, 91. And I actually made it to be the #1 producer in the nation for Lanier in their copier division.
Nice.
And I took all the training they had. I mean, it was a great company. But then, of course, they wanted me to advance to management and pay me half the price. And so I said, okay, well, this is not going to work out for me. Good thing for you. Good talk. I'm going to go start another company. And that's when we started Net Profit. And Net Profit was we were in the turnaround business. So we'd go into companies, we'd take warrants or options, and we wouldn't charge them. We would take a percentage of the growth. So we'd figure out how to measure that. And we would go in, we'd take our team in, and we'd look at, financials, marketing, and we'd analyze the businesses before we took the engagement. But we knew that, if it was a good company, there were certain things to tweak and really make it happen. And one of our best stories on that front was Merco Meats out of Plainwell, Michigan. Mm-hmm. We walked in the door of that business, and it was a kill floor operation. And they were doing about 1,200 heads of cattle a day. And when we left a year and a half later, Paul Murray was doing about 4,600 heads of cattle a day and sold the company for $300 million. That was a really cool one. Then we went over to Thornapple Valley, where we weren't so successful, and we had to put them in chapter. So, there's your ups and downs, but I was tired of the travel and all that. So I was back in Greenville, back in South Carolina, met a guy who had a tax credit consulting business, and he was doing probably making about 80 grand a year, little business, but a cool concept. And so Joey, it was his name. Joey asked me to help him. And I said, sure. And it was more of a fun project. I was back on my feet. I had enough money to pay the bills. I'm like, I was done with the travel, done with the hotel rooms. I just wanted to, I actually went through a divorce, that early marriage that just doesn't last, doesn't work kind of thing. And should have just stayed friends. And so then he was in the tax credit consulting space, and we grew that business. Within a year, he was making about 700,000 to 800,000 a year EBITDA, and still growing. But the money was going out the door faster than we could make it. And I just said, hey, we've got to part ways here. You don't have the money to pay us. They were about $250,000 into us. And I said, let's just figure this out. I don't want it to ruin our friendship. And that was more important to me than the business. And so we came to an agreement. We parted ways, and we went into the tax credit consulting space. Did very, very well. When it was an interesting journey, though, we had a couple times, because the programs it's the WOTC, welfare to work programs, and then we did all the state and local tax credit processing stuff too. And the reason we started the state and local division was because the WOTC credits and the welfare to work credits, they would go into hiatus every so many years, and they get a 3-year extension, and they go into hiatus again. And so because we billed everybody on a contingency fee, when they went into hiatus, the program would go into hiatus. We had to continue to do all the work, take all the payroll in, process all the forms, file them with the Department of Labor, the 8150s, and all of that stuff we had to do. So we were still doing the same work that we were when we were getting paid. So we had to carry, and oftentimes it would be a year and a half that this thing would get caught up in Congress, and then they would make it retroactive. So we started up the state and local division to kind of balance out the cash flow, if you will. And I think that was about the time that I had 3 mortgages on my house to meet payroll. And all my friends were like, how do you get 3 mortgages on your house? And I said, well, you just owe the bank too much money. And
oh, man,
they don't want you to fail, so that was interesting. It was, we sold that business the first time in 2004 to Talks Corporation. But prior to that, I was 38 in 2004. So I guess it was about 32. I went into a state of depression, I would call it. And because I'd set a lot of goals and I'd hit those goals. And these were like goals that I'd set, 10 years prior.
Yeah.
And what I realized, Richard, is it was like, okay, everything was financial in my younger days. Like it was all winning, and that was financial. And then you make it and you realize that, that's not life. That's not all life is about. That's
yeah.
And
So
for a young man, though, that came from the environment that I did, making it, showing that you could be somebody, you could do it on your own. That was all, ego and pride, I guess, now looking back. And so through that really interesting time in 2000, 2020, about 2000, 2001, it became very clear that I needed to rewrite my goals and that I needed to have a higher purpose, not only a higher purpose, but a purpose that was bigger. For me, helping companies, making them millions of dollars in tax refunds, and that was all good and great. But it became with benefits in a card, it became a more personal mission. It became about helping people and about delivering them services and goods that they could not ascertain otherwise. So when we had net profit, I guess it was 99, 98, 99, we were up lobbying for the extension of these tax credits. And our clients, our staffing clients, we had 3 of them at dinner, and they looked at me and they said, well, Carl, you guys get our payroll weekly. You're integrated into our hiring platform. Why can't you come up with an affordable benefits solution? And I'm like, Now, keep in mind, at that time, I knew zero about insurance other than earned income credit. That was it. That was the extent of my knowledge. And in our optimism, myself and my CFO at the time, we said, we could probably do that. Let us look at that. And then out of, my curiosity kicks in and like, well, tell me what the picture looks like now. What does your situation look like that you want us to solve? They said, well, we've got access to the Aetnas, the Cignas, the United, the Blue Cross, the major medical offerings, but those are a 90-day wait.
Yeah. Typically,
we're a 90-day temp to perm. So if somebody qualifies, stays long enough to qualify, typically they can't afford it. So that doesn't work in this space. And even if they can afford it, they get a couple people on the plan, they're paying on a monthly basis. It's got to be paid by the employer, and those people don't work the full month. So they had all kinds of nuances to it that didn't work for the space. And then they had the supplementary products like the Aflac stuff, where if you got hit by a buffalo at 1:00 on a Wednesday, you might get $50. And so that was where the staffing industry was at in 1999 and 2000. And so out popped Benefits in a Card 2 years later, and several $1 million of investment. And knock on wood, we're still kicking. It's been an incredibly rewarding journey. We're helping people every day. We came up with a platform that we used the old net profit platform because we were used to turning, people coming in and out of it. And so we redesigned the platform to be able to do all the things we needed it to do. And I think the most cool thing about the whole process of building Benefits in a Card was the fact that we got to do it with our clients. I mean, our company was built by staffing for staffing. And all the tweaks, like when you look at the Benefits Wizard, our software platform, it's all done. We've built all this over the years. And you look at that platform and it excites me because every time I see it, I get excited because I look at these different reports and I remember the clients that told me that they wanted it. And that's why we did it. Oh, I'd really love, could I see it this way? Or could you guys do this? And I'm like, that's a great idea. And so we'd go and do it, and so when the industry truly built us and that was a really phenomenal thing. And I think the biggest thing that came out of founding Benefits in a Card is that what I also determined was I needed to have a purpose-driven company. And it needed to be faith-based. And I'm Christian.
Yes.
And so I started noticing the difference between, and there are so many secular businesses that are incredibly successful. So it's whatever lane you want to travel in. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do I'm just telling you what worked for me.
Exactly.
I needed to have the right drive. I need to know that I was aligned. My belief is that your alignment is your assignment, and I live by that. And so it's been a cool part of the journey. The next stage of that was really, I think what fueled where I am today was in 2010, I got an infection from skinning a Cape buffalo in Zimbabwe.
No way.
Yeah, I cut my hand and they misdiagnosed it. They thought I had a thyroid issue and I started losing a bunch of weight. And then I saw all of a sudden, about a couple months later, I was bedridden. And anyhow, it turned into endocarditis and it attacked my heart. And it was an infection that could have been killed by straight up 1947 penicillin. But they just misdiagnosed it. So by the time we figured out what it was, it had attacked my heart and the vegetation around my mitral valve was severe and they had to do an open heart and go in and replace that mitral valve. So I knew within, 10 to 12 years, I would have to go in for another open heart to have that valve replaced. So that wasn't a surprise. The second open heart wasn't a surprise in 2022. But as I was getting ready for that open heart, I was going through the testings. I had it done in Charleston, and so I'd fly down. I had to do some testing. They put cameras in you. They go through all your veins, all that stuff, and then they give me a whole list of prescriptions. And I went to the pharmacy to pick up my prescriptions. And Richard, I got hit with a $407 deductible. Ooh. And so you can see me standing at the pharmacy counter. I'm thinking $407, you guys can go pound sand. And then I'm like, well, this really isn't an elective surgery. So I came off the hip, paid my $407 like a good boy, and off I went. But it was interesting. That little moment of paying that bill, turning around and walking towards the pharmacy door that literally wasn't another 20 feet from me. It hit me. This could be somebody's car payment. This could be somebody's grocery budget for their family for the week. This could be somebody's rent. All of these things went through my head, and helping people is what we do. So keep in mind here's my brain. This is painful, right? It was like God stuck a tick on my back and I couldn't get it off. I'm like, so some things you just forget about after a couple of days. You're irritated, but you're like, move on.
Oh yeah. Goodbye.
I couldn't move past it, Richard. I could not. It was like, and I don't know anything about pharmaceuticals. Yeah. Not a thing. Okay. I do now, but at the time I didn't. And so we went out, we hired 3 pharmacists. We told them we wanted a formulary that covered 90% of the prescriptions written. They put that together. They came back to us with 400 and something. We said, that's not good enough. Now we've got over 1,000. During that period of time, so that was 22. Then I had to go in for the open heart. Then I came out of it. Then I worked some more. And then 9 months later, April of 23, I had to go in. I had to go in for my third open heart. And then after that third open heart, they actually had to they took the mechanical valve out, put in a flesh valve for my mitral valve. And then they had to replace my aortic valve too. So it was a dual valve replacement and a big surgery. And I went into a coma and was on life support for 11 days after that.
Oh, no way.
And, which is quite frankly, I think the coma is what saved my life because I needed that time to heal and come back. And during that time, my wife had to make some very hard decisions. They got you on a ventilator, so they had to cut a trach in my throat. They had to whack me with the paddles, bring me back a couple times. I mean, it was a real touch and go 11 days. And of course, I don't remember any of it. And we got home and Cindy could tell I was confused between what was real and what wasn't. I met with Jimmy Pierce, my buddy from the trading floor that I told you about. Mm-hmm. I had dinner with Jimmy. I had lunch with Brian Athorn. I met with my friend Sonny Sutton. I'm telling my wife about this and she's like, Carl, those guys are all dead.
Wow.
And so she knew I was confused. Mm-hmm. And so when I finally got home 22 days later, I think, she sat down and she said, let me just read through my journal. And she didn't read me everything, but just kind of the events. And I looked at her and she's talking about, making the decision to put me on life support, to put me on the ECMO machine, to cut the hole in my throat, put the trach in, all of that stuff. And so she's reading through it and I'm like, holy cow, I had no idea. And so I looked at her and I'm like, baby, don't get mad at me. She said, what? I said, I'm really glad I missed that.
I guess so.
Yeah. So,
wow, Carl.
So I think, and then coming out of that, it was like, I had a lot of rehab to do. I'm still doing it. going on 2.5 years later, I mean, every day it's, training, hot sauna, cold plunge, all that stuff. But that's what you got to do to rebuild. But for me, I actually enjoy that part of it because it's a lot like business. I enjoy the journey and I don't mind the pain, so because I know it's going to be painful. Anything worthwhile is going to have some pain.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
if you're going to exercise, if you're going to stay in shape, if you're going to discipline discipline can be painful. You're not doing what the flesh wants to do. You're not always just doing that, or doing everything that just comes to mind. You know what you should be doing, and you're doing what's right, and you're doing what's right for your body. You're doing what's right for your business. So yeah, that's how FreeRx came about. And now we've put over 120,000 people through that plan.
Yes.
We're launching it to the public. I just reviewed our new website. Fortunately, we ran it when a lot of people would say, you're nuts, right? Because when we started the company, the first place we took it, we introduced it to our benefits in a card block because those were the people I want to help the most. And those are the employees I got to take care of. And I knew that there was no great formulary out and there wasn't, so those were the people I wanted to help first. Looking back, was that a little bit nuts? Probably. To try out something new within your own client base is risk. There's risk to that. But we let it run in the BIC client base and we tweaked a lot of things. We added more pharmacies so the time to the person would be faster. But we're able to so we've got over 1,000 medications, 120 of those are acute. And the acute medications, all of a sudden we had this thought of, oh, well, if it's acute, they've got to go to the pharmacy and pick it up. So we needed to, for those 130 medications, we built in a PBM that takes your FreeRx card. It's 70,000 plus pharmacies that includes CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, Kohl's, Albertsons, Publix, Target, you name it.
Yeah.
And then somebody on the team said, well, what if they don't have a doctor? So we built in virtual urgent care.
Nice.
You can also get primary care. You can get behavioral health, all virtual suites. But in staffing, that whole FreeRx package is $5.99 a week for employee only, and $6.99 a week for your entire family. It's $49.95 a month outside of FreeRx to the public, and $64.99 a month for your family. So it's still incredibly inexpensive.
Yeah, big time.
It's about half the price for the staffing industry because the people aren't staying long enough. So instead of taking that, our public pricing and pushing that for higher margins to the staffing, no, I want to keep staffing as low as I can because people are churning. And then also it's portable, so they can take it with them. So they can go sign up in the public market after they leave assignment.
Oh,
they're
nice.
Gonna pay more, they're going to pay more for it. They're going to be paying more, like $12 a week, but they're not in that staffing environment. And what happens is, if you look at ACA is a great example. They came out, they took away the pre-existing conditions, and then threw ASA out there. And well, what happened? Or ACA? What happened? All the sick people jumped on it and blew the plans up.
Yep.
So I wanted to make sure we didn't make that mistake with FreeRx. And so that's why we started the way we did. But yeah.
Wow, brother, man. What a story, man. I mean, you make an impact. And you know what? Health benefits, we don't even have to talk about that. Everybody needs them these days, and you're making it affordable for everybody, buddy. I mean, the story you have of up and down, I can always say money can't buy happiness sometimes, right, Carl?
It can't. And, I wish for everyone that hears this, I hope that you find your happiness. And for the entrepreneurs out there, all I can share with you is never give up. Just never quit. There's always a way. And I love failure. And that may sound just nuts to you, but when something goes wrong, and you can talk to our staff, when something goes wrong in our shop, I'm usually the guy that goes, good, good. Because quite frankly, we don't learn, really, truly, we don't learn from our successes. We learn when we do something and it doesn't work. And then you have to figure out a better way to do it, or a better way to serve. And, I've committed my life to service. And so, and I love the staffing industry. I love the people. And quite frankly, they've put my kids through college. And so I am committed to the staffing industry, to doing what's best for them, to helping their employees. I mean, that is what wakes us up in the morning. And, we started in 2024, we started a new division of the company. I think I thought it sounded like it would cost less if I called it a division instead of a new company. And boy, was I wrong. But it was in 2023 at our Christmas party. I was finally back to work. Karen Porta, she's our director of client happiness. And Karen came to me and she said, Carl, we've got to start doing integrations. And I was like, why? And now keep in mind, I have ignored this for 15 years, Richard, completely ignored integrations. And so I'm like, why? Well, because we're a technology company. We have our own tech stack. We have, so, and we're that's where our power is, if you will. That's how we administer all this stuff and do everything. And we build it. We build our own shoes. We make our own shoes. And so she's like, we've got to do these integrations. I said, why? And she said, clients want it. Well, then I said, okay, let's go. We'll start an initiative January 1. This is like 2 weeks later, right? Let's do this. And so I decided that I wanted to start making the calls myself, because I wanted to really have an understanding of what the industry was doing on that front. And boy, I talked to Aviante, I talked to TempWorks, I talked to Green Shades, talked to Accor, talked to PeopleSoft, talked to ADP, Paycor, you name it. And
on and on.
Yeah, it just keeps going. And what I learned is that the whole industry, everybody, like all these integrations that I've been reading about for 15 years, they were all just flat files going back and forth, or CSV files, or, FTP to FTP or SFTP.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody was encrypting the data. Nobody was using API, which is automated programming interface, which encrypts all your data and sends it directly to the other computer. So when it lands, it's not, when data gets stolen these days, like we used to think that firewalls mattered. It's not about the firewalls anymore. All of your hacks, all your data breaches, they're taking place when data is in transfer, when it's in transmission. So They're grabbing the data out of transmission, or they're stealing credentials or some other thing. So long story short, between January of 24 and October of 25, we API integrated 360 with 262 plus payroll and HRIS systems.
Awesome, brother, man.
And so we did that, and God, it got, because I was thinking, okay, well, Aviante, Green Shades, and then the more I learned, the more I went, the faster we went, and the more we geared up, and we kept adding IT staff, and several million into this. Somebody said, Carl, what's your ROI on this project? I told him, it's a good friend of mine. He's a business guy, smart as he can be. I said, my ROI on this project is being the company my clients deserve. And he was like, really? You really? And I said, yeah. I said, we're not going to charge people for this. And he looked at me like, I said, yeah, wait till you hear about this. I said, I just did a partnership with Ningio, which is the big cybersecurity training company.
Yeah.
And put it in the benefit sync portal. And I'm telling him the story. I'm like, guess what else we're going to do? I said, we're going to have all this Ningio training. We're going to pay for it. and we're going to give it to the clients for free. He's like, what?
He's
And
like,
I said,
what?
oh, yeah. And I said, and then check this out. For the clients that aren't part of one of our integrations, we're building an API application where they can actually take their payroll data, put it in our app, it converts it to API, encrypts it, and sends it directly back to us. Then the deduction feed, it converts to API and sends it back to them. So it'll ingest and digest, right? And he says, so what are you going to charge for that? I said, nothing. And I said, but you got to hear about the next thing we did. He said, okay, you're killing me. I said, well, we created a certificate, a benefit sync API certificate, that when you come on as a client, we walk you through the Ningio training, and we're now connected. You're sending your data via API. Your certificate basically proclaims how you're sending the data, shows all the encryption that we're doing, and so on and so forth. And you take that to your cybersecurity carrier, and you should get up to a 20% discount on your cyber policy. And he said, there's no charge. I said, for none of it. He's like, I don't know what to think. I said, well, it's either going to be really good or it's going to lose money, but I don't think it will. And you make investments to deliver value. You make investments to, like I said, I don't know any other way to say it than to be the company that your clients hired you to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's who I want to be. That's who our team wants to be. We want to be the company that holds the staffing industry close and that handles them properly and makes sure their people are getting the best benefits. They might not be the cheapest through us. We don't aspire to be the cheapest. We aspire to be the best. And we aspire to have the best customer service, which is one of the reasons we don't outsource anything. Our bilingual call center is operated internally. It's 10 steps out of my office. Our account management team, our IT group, our billing, our reconciliation, everything is done in-house. We don't outsource anything, because what that allows us to do is to control the customer experience. And that's why people bring us in, because they don't want to fool with this. They need to operate their business. And nobody gets that more than I do.
Wow, brother. Well, I got to tell you, I got to thank you so much for opening your door to your life for us today, man. Carl, I mean, this is amazing. I mean, I got to tell you straight up, you know, a lot of people probably didn't know the real you, but at the end of the day, like, I see you're so happy all the time. You know what? I got to tell you, everybody says a good word about you. You know what I mean? So, you know, and that's what I love, is like, you're making an impact for everybody in the industry, man. And that's what it's all about, buddy.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. And it's always great to see you.
Hey, you too, man. Hey, enjoy that sunshine while I'm down here in the 5-degree weather here. You enjoy it down there. If you guys get a chance, make sure you reach out to Carl on LinkedIn or any other platforms there. And Benefits in the Cart, I got to tell you, if you're a staffing firm out there, reach out to them, man. They definitely will help you. Hey, Carl, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, sir. Keep God close.
You got it, buddy. Talk to you soon, guys.